They say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And nowhere is this more true than with World War I and World War II, two conflicts so similar they feel like two stanzas in the same song. But how did the First World War set the stage for the Second? How does understanding the first conflict help us make sense of the second? And most importantly, what can we learn from all of this? Stay tuned to find out. But before we dive in, be sure to hit that like button for more historical tales. When the guns fell silent on November 11, 1918, marking the end of the First World War, it seemed as though the world was ready to move on. The conflict that had gripped the globe for over 4 years had exacted a heavy toll, leaving millions dead and entire nations in ruins. Yet few could have predicted that the peace that followed would be as fragile as it was short-lived. The seeds of future conflicts were sown during this period. Nurtured by unresolved tensions and simmering resentments left over from the Great War, the Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28, 1919, was supposed to be the document that ended all wars. It was a comprehensive peace agreement that not only brought an end to hostilities between the Allied powers and Germany, but also attempted to address the underlying issues that had led to the conflict. However, rather than achieving lasting peace, the treaty became a catalyst for future aggression, particularly in Germany. The treaty's draconian terms, including territorial losses, disarmament and crippling reparations payments, were seen by many Germans as a humiliating and unjust. This sentiment was further inflamed by the treaty's war guilt clause, which placed sole responsibility for the war on Germany, a provision that fostered resentment and a desire for revenge. So why did history repeat itself? What were the factors that transformed the end of one world war into the prelude to another? One significant factor was the failure of the League of Nations, an international organization established in 1920 with the aim of preventing future conflicts. The League, which Germany joined in 1926, was not equipped to deal with the growing tensions in Europe during the 1930s, lacking its own enforcement mechanism. The League was reliant on the cooperation of member nations, many of whom were themselves preparing for another global conflict. Another contributing factor was the rise of totalitarian regimes in Germany, Italy, and Japan. These regimes, with their aggressive foreign policies and territorial ambitions, were a stark contrast to the democratic ideals of the post-war era. The growth of fascism and Nazism in Germany, coupled with Japan's expansionist tendencies in Asia, created a volatile mix that threatened the existing world order. Yet perhaps the most critical link between the two world wars was the unresolved nature of the First World War itself. The harsh peace imposed on Germany created a breeding ground for extremism and revenge, while the failure of the League of Nations to address international disputes left conflicts simmering beneath the surface. It was a failure of diplomacy, a lack of foresight, and the tragic human cost of war that ultimately paved the way for the Second World War. The interwar period, therefore, becomes a crucial bridge between the two world wars. It was a time when the world grappled with the consequences of the First World War, attempting to rebuild, to reform, and to learn from the past. But ultimately, the lessons of the Great War were not fully absorbed, allowing the seeds of conflict to take root and grow. As we continue our journey through history, it's essential to remember and understand this period, not just for its own sake, but for the profound impact it had on the world that was to come. Only by understanding the complexities of this era can we truly appreciate the road that led us to the Second World War and work towards a more peaceful future. In the aftermath of World War I, the world stood at a precipice. The old order had been shattered, leaving behind a landscape scarred by conflict and ripe for change. The path not taken, the decisions that could have altered the course of history, become a fascinating point of speculation for historians and enthusiasts alike. What if the outcomes of the war had been different? How might the 20th century have been shaped by alternative outcomes? Join us as we explore these pivotal moments and the ripple effects they might have had on the world we know today.